Welcome, everyone. We're back here with According to Carlo, and welcome and thank you for joining us. Today, I have a very special guest, Kathleen Black, and we're going to have a very interesting conversation from both of our perspectives, because we've both been around this business for a long time. I'd like to first start by I don't know you as well as I'd like to. Tell me how long ago you started and how you started out in this business.
Yeah, and I always say, like many of us have 9 lives, right? It's like a cat. So I actually started out originally with investment properties. So at the time, my husband, then I almost said late, he has not passed away. We're just not
Oh.
married anymore. But like not late. But at the time I was married and we were kind of in the film district and the beaches, like gutting properties, doing the Burr effect before I knew what it was, creating a unit, moved into the unit, finished the property, refinance, went on to the next. And eventually it was just brought up again and again that I should get my real estate license. And by this time I had 2 young kids. I didn't really want to do that. I was always saying cooking, cleaning, I'm dealing with tenants.
Wow.
Like I'm sanding drywall. I'm like, this is craziness. But eventually I was micromanaging. Or he was a lovely agent. He just couldn't assess the rentals very well. So I was micromanaging the offers and the terms. And so I did get my license, and quickly it became quite stressful on the family unit. And I basically was newly licensed and had to make some hard calls, as we do, go back to managing dental offices or continue as an agent. And for me, it was about the future. At this point I have 2 little kids. I'm now a single mom again. And I kind of said, what has a more bright future for me versus a more safe present? And I know we don't always have the ability to make decisions like that, but looking back, it's one of the most important things I did, because there was some pain initially building a real estate business, but it gave me a future. So first year in real estate, I sold 44 homes, 2 little kids
In
under
your first
5.
year.
2 little kids under 5. And then I continued to sell, but I got into coaching very quickly. So like subsequent years, I was like 65, 70 deals a year. And then I went into what I call pinch years. So pinch years for me or the people I work with, for example, a pinch year could be a top producer wants to build a team. So pinch years, like you're still going to sell at the same production, but you're building out, you're hiring and your training processes and all of this stuff. So it's going to be a pinch, but the future is bright, right? So I went into 2 pinch years of selling and coaching. So I had around 30 coaching clients at the time, and I was selling. And by the end of 2 years, I was like, okay, that's it. I'm just going to run the coaching company. So I ran my prior company, which was the first team specific coaching company for real estate in Canada. And I ran that for about 5 to 6 years. Then I sold my half of the shares and I started Kathleen Black International actually 10 years ago yesterday.
Right. I heard about that. So
Yeah. Thank
congratulations on the
you.
anniversary.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's crazy.
So if I can just step back for a second, and
hmm
so the audience understands that you're telling me you did 44 deals in your first year. I don't need to tell you this, but like that's 0.001% of the people that can do that. So tell me a little bit about how did you do that, and what was it that made you that successful in your first year?
I think there were a few things. I mean, I went onto a team, and that's how I started to build systems and
So
scripts
right
right
away you
off.
started with a team.
I did. And right away I was already building, because when I say I manage dental offices, I think people think of like a small dental office. I used to manage like a dental office with like 40 providers, right? So
Right.
scheduling and systems and reminder calls and language was very important. And I have a psychology background. So as soon as I got into real estate, because I was with a team, I was like, oh, here's the research behind reminder calls. Here's this, right? Like I'm already starting to write scripts and build things. And then going through the divorce, necessity, right? Like I'm in a place where the court's frozen everything, like our accounts, they've ordered our investment properties
Oh
sold,
boy.
which I still begrudge a
Yeah.
little bit. So, hey, it's not fair. But you're in that position. And I always said when I was working, I was working. And some people see it as robotic, but I say a lot of what I coach and the efficiencies and the mindset come from those years.
Of course.
Like saying, model what works. Like we don't need to hang around the coffee, the coffee. Yeah, the water cooler, the old way of saying it. Like we want to have community and relationships, but I think sometimes we really want to do what other people are doing. And if you look at the average performance in our industry, that's not always a good thing. Right.
No
So I
question.
like to cut through to what's actually working. And just that is such an edge. If it's vetted, it's working, there's numbers, there's proof. Now I'm interested in it, because as a single mom, I didn't have time otherwise.
So you started coaching that quickly, people.
Yeah.
So you've got quite the background. And then when you started your coaching company, you started as a team focused coach.
It was interesting. So the coaching company was started. I always say it's funny how life, like some of my opportunities were maybe unfortunate events for other people, but no, it took them in other directions. So the company was started. There were three owners. Within 18 months, they weren't getting along so great. There's a lot of changes, and two of the owners were going to exit. I thought it was my lucky day because I was already now a coach, director of coaching. They wanted me to become CEO. I'm already running the company. So, I negotiated to fully run it, like to have a silent partner with the main person who had started the company. But before I took on the company, I found out it was in considerable debt. But I always say, I had the full card because for me, I was like, I get to run this company. Like I get to do something I love. And I believe in coaching and I believe in leadership. So took on the company. It was about $200,000 in debt. So you could say now I was minus 100,000, but really you're running the company. I was minus
Sure.
$200,000. Cleared that up, so I learned to run accounting wise, keeping it in the black, right, and paying off debt. And once the debt was cleared off, the company had grown quite a bit. The silent partner wanted to go in a different direction, and I kind of went, what do I do? And it was the best thing that could have happened because then I
Of
went on my
course.
own, and we had really quick growth the first couple of years, but I would have never went on my own. And I think people hearing this, some people think, is Kathleen, so driven that she left? Is like, I would have never left. I love the company. I love running it. I didn't care if it had my name. I didn't care at all.
So it's
I
just
just wanted to do what I
it's the old
loved.
sliding doors. You just things change, and
Yeah, you go with it.
you go with it. So again, your coaching initially was focused on team
It
coaching.
was only teams
It was only
then.
teams
Yeah.
because that's what you were part of when you started, and
Yeah.
that's what you knew best.
For sure. That's what I knew best. And I mean, I was running a coaching company. I had a team of coaches, we're coaching teams. And even the people who came to coach with us individually, they knew they wanted a team.
Right.
So everything we were doing was to be scalable.
So, I guess from my, past 40 years of being doing this, I ran my own little shop. I was
Yeah.
just by myself for 9 years. And then I went to manage for Royal LePage corporate office for 1 year. I wasn't a very good employee. And so then I ended up buying the business that we are now. It was 35 agents and we grew it to 200 agents. But, it's interesting. I'm fascinated to know a little bit more because I was never, and I hope forgive me for this, but I was never a big fan of teams as an operator. And the reason I would say that is because I found in the last 21 years, it became very popular. So I've had this business for 21 years and I followed it and I examined it and I scrutinized it. What I found personally was, and I found, sorry, let me go back to this. You really found a niche in terms of coaching teams because it became very popular.
Mhm.
What I was always watching was I never saw successful teams unless they were in the long run, unless they were husband and wife, mother, daughter, father, son, or brother, sister, or family, or tight knit teams. Because if you wanted to grow the team, you have to involve other people. And in our business, I found that the real estate business was just so difficult. Unless you're a true partnership, it's just hard to manage because not
Yeah.
everybody contributed the same.
Mhm.
And so unless it was all going in the same pot, I found the teams a fascinating thing, but I also found them not successful in the long run. So I'd like to understand it a little bit better. What is it that you see? How does a team succeed in the long run,
Mhm.
especially when they get so big these days?
Yeah, and the market's changed
Of
too,
course.
right? So that they tighten up all businesses when this happens. But I think it was the perfect time to be bringing a team specific coaching company because the brands in general were not supportive. Now
Yes.
it's very different, but at the
Yes.
time the brands were not supportive. So
Correct.
when people say, how did you get into coaching? Like, did you have a national brand? Like the national brand affiliations came very many years later and after being very well vetted because we were the opposite. We weren't business to business, so to speak. We were coaching to the top producer. So the top producer was saying, I'm capping out. What do I do next? What does life look like? Like I can't sustain working 85, 90 hours, or they didn't want to sustain it. And they were saying, what's next? So we came in to say, you can be what I call now a founder, but then you can be a business owner. You can be a driver and you don't have to only be the operator selling on the ground. But the difficulties came in where there was a lot of advice of like just partner up with somebody and put it all in the same pot and share everything, and then one person's doing 20% of the sales, the other person's doing 80, and the person doing 80% is doing their own paperwork. Let's just give an example, right?
Yes.
That's going to blow up, and the majority of people who actually invest in having a coach or consultant to assess a partnership, 80% plus don't end up to do it once they dive deeper.
Okay.
What's your
So that's
vision? What's my strength? What's your strength? They don't have the clarity. Usually we're hiring out of necessity and out of fatigue, just honestly. And when we do that, it's not proactive. And therefore it's like, oh, I just know someone who has a friend and they can help me, and please come help me.
So
Right.
they're hiring, and I see they're hiring for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
in a place that they're not thinking straight. So people would come to me and say, listen, my experience was I started to arbitrate issues between
Yes,
team leaders and
for
team
sure.
subordinates. And I'm going, guys, like they all want to be their own brokers, and they got team members for the wrong reasons because they were burnt out. They were
Yeah.
tired. They wanted someone else to make the money and do the work for them.
Mhm.
But eventually, I always used to say to people, look, if a team member is that good, number one, they're probably not going to stay with you long. And number two, they'll want to probably just create their own team. And so that was always an issue. And then I'd have team leaders come to me, say, this guy's doing this and this guy's doing that. And then I'd have to
Mm.
arbitrate that issue. And they would just hire people. They just think, oh, Carlo, do you know someone who would join my team? Well, if I knew someone who would join your team, I'd like
Mhm.
them to join my team first. And so
Yeah,
there's that broker. I find it a fascinating relationship between team leaders, subordinates, and the brokerage itself.
for
So
sure.
you must have, in your travels, you'd be dealing with that all the time.
Yes and no. I mean, yes, 100% we do, but the people who build with us, we get ahead of it. Like, for example, one of our steps, and, we've worked closely with Royal LePage Canada for several years
Yes,
now.
yes.
And one of the steps is, before you recruit, when we're creating compensation plans, when we're creating team member agreements, one of our steps is you go and meet with your broker manager or your broker owner. And there's a whole list of questions, and you share that agreement and you get on the same page, and you make sure that they're okay being on the same page,
Right.
so that if something goes wrong, the broker, owner, or manager isn't caught off guard. They're able to actually facilitate. They know that the team member has vetted this, had the chance to have a lawyer look at it, knew what they were getting into on both sides. And I think not all teams are created equal. They're phenomenal teams who provide amazing training. Some of them provide leads, but here nor there. It's like if you're on a team that their conversion, for example, is 85% for sit down at the table to get a listing, just as an example, and you on your own are 60%, even your personal business and your team business is going to grow being in a strong team environment. And I think, the market's difficult. People are cutting back on marketing, they're cutting back on staging, they're cutting back on media, and we know that's going to hurt them, right, in the long run. So people need to work together, but the problem is if you don't have a foundation as a team, if you don't have the value, if you don't have the structure, that's where it crumbles. But I think for most individual agents, it's really hard to operate at a high level on your own, right? And there's a lot. I'm careful because there's so many team models,
Of
right? You can
course.
have
Of
200
course. No,
agents
I
who
get it.
sell like 8
I get it.
deals a year. The market goes down and all of a sudden they're selling 4. You're going to have a big retention problem, right?
Yep.
But if you have a strong team where you have maybe 5 or 6 or 10 or 12 who sell more, hey, they might go down to 35 or 30 deals a year, but you're still going to retain them. Then you need to recruit, you need to keep the culture good, you need to make sure
Right.
people aren't like this, right?
So in your travels, is there we have an attrition rate, let's say that there's an
Yeah.
industry attrition rate in a
Yeah.
brokerage like mine. Is the attrition rate in teams, mid-sized teams, large teams, is it kind of correlated? Is it the same? Or are we subject to more attrition than teams would be?
I think it depends on the team. I mean, this year, the analogy I've kind of had is like, if you think about a canoe, right? If you look at the industry or you look at teams, they're having similar issues. You've got somebody at the back who's trying to direct where you're going. You've got somebody at the front who's trying to paddle with everything they can. And then you've got a lot of people sitting in the middle who are just like looking
Looking
around.
around.
And you're like, you can't, like, you got to paddle, right? So in the industry, we've got this middle falling out in our average producers.
No
And you're like,
question
where are they
about it.
going?
No
And then
question
in
about it.
teams, because we had COVID, because things have been heavy, right? People are tired. People are feeling the weight of the last COVID, then the economic changes, the political changes. They're feeling the weight. And some people just are not ready to adapt. And that's hard on broker owners. It's hard on team leaders. I think on team leaders, it's even harder if they're covering a lot of expenses, right? Because
Of
they've got to
course.
make hard
Of
calls of like,
course.
how long can you sit in my boat? I know it's pretty scenery, but I'd like to look at it too one day,
Right. Then you've now your 10-year anniversary. Again, congratulations. Now,
Thank you.
you're now not just team focused, but just focused on coaching even individual realtors, correct?
Yeah, we're still, I'd say we're, and I'm careful I say, we're founder focused. And when I say that, I finally learned that. It's taken me 10 years to understand like who the avatar and who I love working with is. And when I say we're founder focused, you can be an individual agent, but if you're gross commission mindset, if you're, I want the award, but I'm making nothing at the end of the year, if you're not looking at it and saying, well, I'm hiring myself to do marketing, to do conversion, to be the sales agent, I'm hiring myself to run client events, and you're not analyzing yourself, then you're in a place where it's very difficult to grow. So to me, whether you're a solo agent or you're a teampreneur, right? Are you thinking like a founder? I say to
Right.
people all the time, if you had a team and your team member was marketing the way you are, would you keep them?
Right.
What feedback would you give
Of
them
course.
if they were converting the way you are? And all of a sudden they see what I'm saying. I'm like, a team, we've just divided those sections,
Right.
but we still have to assess what's working, what's not.
But you're not necessarily guiding people to create teams.
Some people work with us who do not want teams. We're
Right.
still a team coaching company at the base, but we have programs now for individual
Okay.
agents,
Okay.
for entrepreneurs, and then of course for teams.
So I'm a huge believer. I always get asked, what's your training program? What do you do for me? I always tell people, well, come and visit me for 5 minutes a day, every day.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to ask you what you did today.
Fair.
And that kind of, that lasts maybe 2-3 sessions.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't go from there. So I like to say, what are you doing about it? We've had every trainer here and I love their stuff. Their stuff is fantastic. I'm a huge believer in hiring people that do what they do because they're specialists at it.
Mm-hmm.
So am I the best trainer in the world? No, I know what it takes to be successful. I've sold every type of real estate. I've been exposed to every type of agent, from people who can't produce at all to big time producers. So I see what works, what doesn't work. But in the end, when I meet newer people or people that are struggling, and this is a frustration from someone like me, is I say, look, I offer, if you put your skin in the game, I'll say to someone like, okay, why don't you call Kathleen, or why don't you call Richard Robbins, or why don't you call Chris Leader? And I'll say, tell you what, they have coaching companies. You sign up for coaching, you front end load the cost. You pay for it. And I'll tell you why I think you should do this. And I explain to them why I think it's so valuable, because what you guys do, I think is fantastic. And you do it for a living. You're doing it every day. So you see what goes on every day and what works and what doesn't work. I guess a frustration from my point is they're not willing to make a small investment in themselves. And I even offer them that I will pay for it with the fees that I collect from you up until the amount of your coaching. And so it's free, kind of. And I guess the frustration from my point, and maybe you can help me with that, is how do I get people to do this? Because they don't want to do it.
It's interesting, right? Like even recently, we just came off our conference and we had once a year, we do something called the deal drop, which is where I add a whole bunch of bonuses, right? And we talk about the power of having a strong brand, because over time, I'm like, I can add enough bonuses that it matches their coaching investment. So I'm like, literally 5 years ago, you would have paid double for this. But because we centralize, I can offer this. So it's interesting because we had multiple people who want to build their team sign up for the lowest coaching option. So I had to call them and I said, well, why are you signing up for something that's so much lower than your business level, right? And they're like, well, I want to be like this person. And I saw this person. It's like that person's on the top team level. So it was interesting that even when it comes to their business, they're looking at it and saying, well, I want to invest the absolute smallest amount possible, but I want the biggest gains and rewards. And I think that's why I'm working so hard on this founder mentality, because business people understand investments and we analyze return on investment and we look at it very different from expenses and costs. And the more I can nurture that mindset, it's like, yeah, you should expect return on investment and you should track that and you should analyze that. But to think that you're not going to need investments to have a huge level up, I don't know a single producer big producer who hasn't had a lot of support, whether it's mentorship or coaching support. So I think part of it is the fear. I think it's the market, but I think it's also this mentality of, if I have a $20,000 commission check, I got paid $20,000, but it's like, there's no business that runs that way. Right.
100%.
And I think when we budget it and they see, what should I be investing in, coaching or marketing, all of a sudden they're like, oh, that is a part of how I grow. It's part of the recipe.
So I get frustrated because they go, well, isn't that your job to coach me? I'm willing to invest in you if you could just invest in yourself. So maybe you can help me on how to convince people to make these small investments. And I tell people, you just got into the real estate business. You now have a license to make as much money as you possibly want. And it costs almost nothing. The barriers to entry are almost nothing. Now invest a little bit in yourself. And the one thing I tell them is, not only will it tell you about the real estate business, but more importantly, it'll tell you about yourself.
Absolutely.
And that's what I try to do. I said that meeting with me every day may or may not do that, but let's meet with the stars and the people that actually know how to train and coach people like you to get to where you want to go. And I'm going to be your partner, because I'm going to invest in you once you invest in yourself.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, we have something where we talk about, and I'll explain because I don't want you to think I'm being insulting. I promise I'm not. You don't. I promise.
Don't worry.
You'll hear why. So there's a premise that you don't go to local experts for global results, right? And I think, it's interesting that if I want to have global results, right, I go to global keynote speakers and
You're
speaking
not insulting
coaches and
me
coaching
because that's what
coaches,
I'm.
and I go to them because I don't want to be a big fish in a small pond. I know my vision. So if we can help leaders say, okay, where's your vision, right? Like the majority of our clients are top 1% national producers because they all are. They help each other get there. It's just normal. So in their eyes, they are national producers, and therefore they want to be part of national communities. And I think that that's a big piece. You need local support, you need hands-on support, but if you want to be top 5% or top 1%, that's a national playing field. That's very
Right.
different. You need to plug in to other producers who are where you're at, because just by premise, any brokerage, even the top producing brokerages, are going to have more of your middle 80% or maybe your top 50% if they're really, really good. You're still only going to have so many resources for your top 1% or your top 5%. So I think it's that. And I think it's also, there are people who invest in getting really strong at their craft. They carry those skills with them the rest of their career.
Of course.
I'll say, look at, like, there are people literally 10 years, haven't had a buyer presentation, haven't had a consultation, don't have a listing consultation. I'm like, can you imagine how much business they've left on the table? How much money they're losing? For most of us, our loss by not investing is actually phenomenally higher than
Yes.
the potential, than the opportunity cost of investing in coaching.
No question. And from a brokerage point of view, I had to continually invest. I had to buy the business,
Yeah.
pay that off. And then I had to move into this location
Yeah.
and invest in the location.
Mhm.
And it was literally 10 years into the brokerage where I took a salary,
Yeah.
but it was 10 years of time and investment, money,
Mhm.
before we started turning real profits.
Yeah.
And that I could then maybe claim as a profit and maybe save a little bit.
Sure.
It takes time,
Yeah.
but you have to build it. But you have to start with a foundation investment mentality and a
Mhm.
growth mentality. And I guess that's the challenge. And we have so many people in this business. I mean, we have 75,000 GTA realtors running around,
Yeah.
which that's a whole nother discussion for another day. But I guess, I'm always challenged and always have to figure out, what is it when someone says to me, well, what are you going to do for me? Why should I join you? How are you going to train me? If I have $1 for every time someone says that to me, I wouldn't be working anymore. But tell me, if you were in my position, having seen what I've seen, what is it that you would say? So I walk into you and you're me, and I walk in you and say, why should I join you? What are you going to do for me? And I'm talking about a new person.
Okay. Yeah.
Tell me what you would say to them.
Well, I'd say first of all, I think I'm going to say this to you. I think it's hard for broker owners, right? The contractor basis of realtors make it very hard. So I'm in the team space where it's like, you want to be a member
Yes.
of our
Very good.
team.
Thank you for
That
pointing that out.
it's different. You want to be a member of our team. Hey, you need to learn these things and be
Yes.
tested on these things, and you need to be capable of this, because we're not going to invest. Like, multiple teams come to us and say, you tell me if they're ready to go, because we're not giving them opportunities until they are, because the industry is so much, oh, I want leads, I want this. And it's like, you want to be capable of converting leads. You want to be capable of providing high levels of
Correct.
value. You don't want leads because everyone throws them out the window. So brokers are prey to this. I want leads, or I want training, and then people don't show up to the training. It's very difficult. So I think from a brokerage basis, if you're attracting somebody new, it would be, look at the environment, right? What are the average producers in that environment? Where are you likely to raise to if you're part of that environment? And how quickly can you get mastery and skill set that's going to carry you through your career? So if the brokerage is more maybe part-time or no training at all, or there isn't a lot of mentorship, or you can't talk to someone, or the average producers in the brokerage are very, very low, you're going to be the average of the sum of your parts. So I think we underestimate the power of our environments. I'm here in a beautiful office that has space for people to come together, talk to their clients, meet in a place that they feel proud of and they feel professional. And I think people have underestimated the power of that in recent years. And now that the market is more trying, people want reliable, vetted professionals. And you can't underestimate that, and you can't fake it.
So Kathleen, I've lived through 4 recessions: early 90s, 2008, 2017, and then the most recent 3.5 years. Who do you think in this marketplace? So like I said, I've been through all these different types of markets, and especially now, us older people, we say, if you've been in the business for 25 years or less, we call you brand new because you've only seen it going one way.
Yeah.
And then we had, like I said, we had brief, spurts of recessions in 2008 and 17. But from 1996 to now, it's been almost straight up until 3 years ago. What is your advice to people in terms of who needs the type of coaching given today's marketplace? Are there brand new people that require more coaching? Is it mid-level people? Is it high-end people?
Mhm.
So especially in this marketplace, how do you determine what level of coaching they need and what they're looking for?
I think the truth is anyone who wants to grow needs coaching. Like I've always had coaching. I've invested in multiple different platforms because I need to grow ahead of where I want my business to be. And I think we think that we work our way into having our businesses where we want to be, and that there's an extent of that. Like you have to show up, you have to work hard. Yes, of course, but you have to mentally give yourself permission to see yourself as capable of your next step before you actually walk into it. And so, the new agent, they need the tools of the trade, right? I always say to them, what's in your toolbox? An agent who has a $60,000 a year income versus one that's 250 or 500,000 or, 10 million, they have very different tools in their toolbox. So I say to them, like, you can't expect to get up to 250,000 a year with a $70,000 agent toolbox. And that could be how you communicate. It could be your confidence, right? And I think it's an interesting market because statistically, the majority of agents need coaching right now, and they need it quite a
For
bit.
sure. For
We have
sure.
we have good people leaving the market, and that's happened before. And I remember, you talking about 2017. I remember being on calls with huge teams and them freaking out because they had never been in a buyer's market. And I was like, guys, we have systems for this. Like, we've already been trained for this, but their mindsets weren't ready for it. So we had the systems, but we had to go back to how do we provide value? How do we talk to people? End of the day, sales or consulting, as I look to it, is a transfer of comfort and confidence and trust, right? So if you are not confident as an agent, if you can't analyze this market and analyze opportunities, how are you then going to transfer enough confidence for a buyer or seller to let you educate them, let alone let them transact? That's not going to happen. So everything is a modeling process, right? So I'm trying to model to our community, how do you lead at a higher level? How do you communicate value at a higher level? Because I know they will then do it with their team members, and their team members will do it with the public if you're a team space. So end of the day, right now, the biggest gap we're seeing is the traditional agent who is not process driven. Right now, the people getting hit the hardest are the ones waiting for their database to call them, waiting for somebody to say, show me the house. And they're like, I don't get it. My phone isn't ringing. And we have people calling us now, been like the last 2 years, we're consistently going down. Maybe they've been saved by like GCI, but their units are going down. And I've always said, watch your units, even in a
No
good market. I
question
know you're
about it.
making more money, but
Absolutely.
the trajectory and power of your business is correlated with the number of sales you do in a year. So if you're down 10 units, another 10 units, and the market adjusts, we'll just say adjusts, and all of a sudden your GCI is going down, you're going to be in big trouble. But if you're watching the units, you can protect a little more. So do you have the process? Do you have the language and the skill set at every single step? That's the foundation of those who are doing well. Like we just came off conference, people are up 25%, 30%,
Yeah,
50%. We
it's
have people who
incredible. And
tripled last year and they're up 50% again. But it's not magic. It's process driven. It's very strategic.
so you obviously assess what their needs are. So there must
Yeah.
be some sort of discovery call or something like that that you
Yeah,
decide, where are you now? Where do you want to go? And I guess you dig deep into what their actual talents are and
for
and
sure.
and what they're capable of doing.
Well, and this is why, in some ways, I have a complicated business model because, if we have for example, if we had a very centralized coaching model where every coach week one talks about client events and week
Yes.
two, every
Mhm.
coach talks about tagging in your CRM, my model would be a lot more scalable. But the reality is, we like seeing people have massive success. And that massive success comes from making sure we're building clear and confident leaders. And that piece is so underestimated. Like the first pillar for every single new client, whether they're a team leader, they're a CEO, they're, a new agent, is something called we call the inside out method. And that method is to get them deeply aligned and clear. So like if you are clear and you are confident, you will make very different choices and your capability can expand by 10 times. Your capacity can expand. If the success of our businesses is based on the quality of our choices, I need them to be very confident and clear of where they want to be a year from now. So they're willing to choose to invest in the right systems, the right habits. But if people come in and there's like, well, give me this tool. What do I say to people on the phone, or optimize my CRM? It could be anything. Like, I don't know. I don't call my database. Like, how many people still don't call their database, right? So like, ease me into it. How do I do it? If I don't first help them get truly aligned, where do they want to be a year from? What are their true values? A lot of people come to us like, I want to make $1 million a year. But then I say, well, what have you been doing the last couple of years? Well, I don't know. I just keep hitting the same amount, because our conscious brain is like, I want $1 million. I want a Ferrari. I want to go to Maui, whatever, right? But your unconscious, it chooses the route for you, whether you like it or not. So if inside you're like, I feel like I'm a bad parent because I'm going to work all the time to be a 7-figure earner, or I feel like I'm going to get divorced, or I feel like I'm already burnt out, but I don't want anyone to know. And if I worked harder, I might have a heart attack.
Any one of those things will prevent you from.
And you don't even know. Or maybe inside you don't want anyone to know, but you're like, I still feel like, who the heck am I to show up and do any of this? And they're huge leaders who inside in private rooms are like, who am I to even think I could grow? And it's like, you're a multi 7-figure earner. But we need safe spaces to talk about that, because if your internal is, again, 100,000 or 500,000, but you're trying to say you want 1 million, we've got to align it, not change your goal, but align it and bring it into the conscious, and then say, okay, now we'll build our plan. Right. So I'll give you an example to kind of bring, like, when I used to sell real estate, I was very similar to how you do one things, how you do anything. But people used to see my schedule and they'd be horrified. Okay. So they'd be horrified. They'd see it. They'd be like, how are you booked back to back? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I know my vision a year from now. I wrote it all out. I envisioned it. I saw it. I felt it. I know my values, and my goals are aligned with those things. So I took my goals, I broke them down. I know all my conversions, right? And then I created a perfect week. And then I created the momentum makers, like, how many calls do I have to do? When do I have to go to the gym? What date nights? What time with my kids? Like, everything. And that's all built into my schedule. So when people saw it, they're like, don't you want to escape from your schedule? Like, this is my recipe to have everything I want.
Right.
I have vacation weeks. I have off seasons. Why would I sabotage my own recipe? And that's the magic in it. We don't have quotas. We don't tell people what to do. We let them create their recipe.
What you just mapped out is why we have such a huge failure rate in our business. So you're like part of that 1% of people that thinks that way. And whether you want to admit it or not, I've analyzed psychology of people for the last 21 years, especially owning this, but 40 years being doing this. You're in that very small amount of people. When a brand new person comes in, unfortunately, as a broker, mentally, I'm saying I have an 80-90% chance that this person or this agent is not going to make it. Mm-hmm. How do I increase those odds? So number one, why is that? What is it about a successful realtor that makes them different? How do you identify that? And how do you know whether they're going to make it and stay out of that 80-90 percentile that doesn't make it?
I think a couple of different pieces. We adapt to our environment. So it's like, if I'll take it in the coaching world. Okay. So if I'm recruiting a coach, like, a coach has to have a multifaceted understanding of a full business, right? And I think a successful agent does as well, truly. But they're going to come in and go through training. And on teams, we do the same thing. So we call it sales onboarding. So they're going to go through training. And if they don't pass that training, they don't come into our actual team meetings. They don't actually come in. Now, brokers don't have.
That's where the models are so different.
And that's very helpful. But how many team leaders are very scared to do that? And why? The strong team leaders are like, thank goodness, this person was never going to work out. I found out in the first 3 weeks, whereas the other team leader found out in the first 3 years. That's a big difference. But I want to say, I think those of us who believe in coaching, like, I believe in coaching because I truly believe in leadership. I truly believe in embodied leadership. People who grow their leadership,
there's no question,
they change their worlds. And the truth is, like, I didn't come from, like, the real estate industry. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. I came from a family of people in public service, like fire department. And I always say they were walking towards fires, walking towards emergencies. And it helps me a lot in business because I'm a person who comes to the table. Something's going on. I want to have a conversation. Let's talk about it honestly. I will take responsibility. And I think these habits help people so much, right? When people are having excuses, they're creating drama. They don't want truth. They're not interested in truth. They're interested in facades. Leadership and coaching is about helping people step into their truth and taking responsibility for their power. When
That's
I'm going
great.
through a divorce and I have nothing, I had to take responsibility for how are you going to show up, because nobody owes you anything. So are you going to learn what you need to learn? Are you going to invest in it? Are you going to care about efficiency? Or are you going to say, I like doing it this way, so who cares? I'm leaving 80% of the business on the table. And these are hard truths, but they're life-changing truths, right? So I think part of the industry is like, when you're in a coaching environment, I have benchmarks because, like you, I study human psychology. So I'm like, if you put people in an environment where nothing's really asked of them, they'll come in way below their potential. But you come in and you say, over the thousands and thousands of agents I've trained, if you learn this buyer consultation, you learn how to communicate with people, 80% of people will hire you. And all of a sudden they're trained on, and they can see the people around them and they go, oh, wow, I'm only at 40%. Now I'll reach for that 80% because I have a benchmark. So now I don't just have a business plan, I have a potential plan, right? So think about the power of that. If they're tracking how they do in all parts of their business, I can come in and go, oh my gosh, you're so good here. You're so good here. We're leaving so much business on the table on the phone. Let's listen to your calls. Let's get really good at being excited and talking to people and giving value. Now it can double their business just by helping them tweak their weak spot because they were brave enough to say, I want to know the truth of how I'm showing up.
And in your travels, what percentage of people actually take you up on that path?
Yeah. So the people who hire us, and I'll okay, and I don't want to contradict myself, but I might accident. When it comes to helping people in real estate, it's very much about, can you give enough value to make people comfortable to walk one step further?
Right.
Most agents accidentally try to make them walk 10 steps further. It's like, you can't tell them to jump up the
Correct.
staircase. Like, you need to make them confident and comfortable. In coaching, if I took a very traditional sales approach, which I personally don't believe in, and I push people and I use fear and I use pressure, my business would be 10 times bigger. This is just true. But I'm not in it for that. I want to build leaders. So when people come to me and they say, if you were on my back, I'd do more calls, I'd do more. I say, you don't want me on your back. You want to channel what's in you that allows you to be consistent and do what you're capable of doing. So I'll be on calls with people. I say, listen, you have to be ready. I can tell you I'm vetted. I can tell you, if you show up, I can guarantee this, this, this. And I can guarantee 30% improvement in conversion by calling more or learning how to say the right thing. I can double it if they do both. But the reality is, I want them to choose to show up.
Right.
So
That's
the
the
people
key.
who come in our environment, 80% of them, once they're in, they will keep showing up. But I'm pretty picky about not pushing the people I don't think are actually ready.
What you're doing for the business is fantastic. I think what we as a brokerage community is doing to the business is a little counterproductive, because I think that the mentality has been hire as many,
Yeah. Yeah.
hire as many as you possibly can, because the brokerage models have moved to very high split environments.
Mhm.
And from a brokerage perspective, there's only so many resources that we have because the splits are so high in the agent's favor, rightfully so. But what happens is, the only way that we can operate is we need more people.
Yeah.
And so that dilutes my ability to be that effective mentor, that effective coach 24/7,
For sure.
because the business doesn't work unless I have an X number of amount of people.
Mhm.
And to have that next amount of people and provide that level of service is quite challenging. So that's
Yeah.
why I came, 2-3 years ago, I came up with this idea of, hey, let them invest in themselves.
Mhm.
I will back them up. And I'm a little confused at why it hasn't worked. Maybe you can coach me on that.
Well, I think, we don't fall like, once you're a leader, leaders follow the leaders, the 80% follow everyone else, right? So it's like, as leaders, we build a brokerage or we build a coaching or we build a real estate team and we say, okay, we've got our first protege, let's just say, and we get them up and going and they're doing really well. Once we recruit more people, they're not modeling us. They're modeling those top leaders,
Right.
right? So
Right.
we're always looking at, what are they ascribing to be like and to grow into, because I think the end of the day, even me, I can say coach, or I can say I've done this 2,000 times, and they will call somebody who's done it with us in the last year, and that will be more influential on their decision than like my 16-year track record in
Right.
coaching. And I don't get upset about it. I just go, I'm thankful for the community,
Yes.
because you need that. And in a brokerage, I think that's the big piece. It's that community of watching what's possible. So, I think top achievers have to want to invest in growing, and there's nothing we can ever do to make people do it. In my experience, you try to push people, they
Yeah.
push back even more. So I think it's more investing in helping them have the vision forward where then they want those resources to get there.
It's so true. I have some amazing stories here. We have people that are been here since brand new, and they've had incredible successes. We've had 3 or 4 winners with the 35 under 35.
Right.
I just wish I had more and more stories that I could say that, they just grew. They grew with us with the training and the mentoring, I guess, is what I'm looking at. But I'm a big believer in specialists. And, I can, when something goes wrong with the toilet over here, I just don't try to fix it. I just call my plumber friend and say, just fix it.
Yeah.
Right. I could sit there for 3 hours and try to do it, but that's just not very productive. I think what you do is fantastic. I think what your industry does is fantastic. I just really, really wish people in our industry took more advantage of it. Maybe me as a broker have to get a little bit better at pushing people towards that. But like you said, you can't push them too hard. I think there's just so much area for growth in our business.
I agree.
That it's tapping into it and finding that. I think in these days, in these times, I think there's never been a time, 40 years, I keep saying 40 years, but the time that I've been doing this, I don't think there's ever been a time, because things have gotten so complicated with technology and AI and the marketplace and the amount of people that are in our business. There's never been a better time to really look at look in the mirror, look at your business and hire a professional to help you to get to where you want to go. I don't think there's ever been a time more than the present for that to take place. So, maybe we can even talk about that in terms of how we can maybe work together on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we rise out of difficulty, and when we see that, we can make the choice to be courageous and lean in. And when we don't see it, we try to hold back, and it costs us a lot.
No question about
Definitely.
it. So listen, Kathleen, thank you. I can't thank you enough for being here. I know you came a long way. It's really interesting times. And to have people like you sit down with people like me, maybe we can provide some value to people out there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Thank you.